I'm delighted and thrilled to welcome Will Mabbitt, the great author, children's author Will Mabbitt, who honestly, if you haven't seen the range of books he's written, they range from the wonderful I Can Only Drew Worms, obviously aimed at very young children, to titles like Embassy of the Dead, really exciting stories for older children. So not only am I joined by Will, but I'm also joined by Demi, one of our students from Ormiston Dean's Academy, and I'm basically going to shush and let Demi and Will get stuck in. So, Demi, can I hand over to you to ask your first question?
Yeah, so what was your favourite book when you were at school?
At the start of high school, I was quite good at reading, and I read loads and loads of books. So I think at the start of high school, I was probably reading books like and really enjoying books like Roald Dahl sort of books, like the older ones, like The Witches and things like that, and the BFG. Maybe I was reading a lot of fighting fantasy books as well, which are those choose your own adventure ones.
Steve Jackson.
Yeah. I realise this isn't making me sound very cool, but yeah, those books definitely. And then towards the end of high school, I was reading adult books, and I was reading books that probably I shouldn't have been getting my hands on as a kid, probably like adventure story, like grown up adult books. And violence, because you run out of books. I mean, like, this is the problem, I think. I was lucky that I was brought up in a house that had loads and loads of books, but they were all my dad's books, and he'd got them all from his dad. So they were old books. They were all sort of Victorian adventure stories. So there's stories like The Lost World and Sherlock Holmes, the Arthur Conan Doyle books. There was no like female authors in that bookshelf that I can remember reading at all and I don't think I've read like a book by, apart from like younger kids books like Enid Blyton and things like that. I hadn't really sort of read any sort of serious books by women authors and things like that. So I was really starved of books. I was getting my books from all around at that stage, and like anywhere I could get my hands on. So if we went to stay with family somewhere, I'd take a book. They'd lend me a book out of their bookcase, and I'd just read those books. So loads of spy books and thrillers and things like that. James Bond books and things.
I think that's one of the differences, perhaps, Will, when you and I were youngsters. There's so many more books for young adults now. There's a huge range. What are some of the books that you read, Demi?
I mean, I think I've just finished reading Pride and Prejudice and The Great Gatsby.
Oh, wow.
And I got one for Christmas, which is called Reckless Women, and that was quite good. It was quite different.
Is Reckless Women, is that a modern book, or is that like a classic?
I think it's fairly new.
Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I haven't read The Great Gatsby or Pride and Prejudice, or any of those books like that. It's like a real hole in my reading, that there's so many classics that I haven't read. And I kind of nowadays I try to read new books a bit more, because I think it's quite easy to, I don't know why. I'm just trying to read a few more new books at the moment.
I think the newer books are definitely like easier to read.
Well,
like,
I think
a lot of my friends would rather read the new books rather than the old books because they're easier to read.
I think that's true. And I think I don't know why new books. I mean, obviously they've got like the language is more suited for modern day. If you read something, I imagine like Pride and Prejudice, not that I've read it, or if you read like the books that I was reading when I was a kid, like Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes, they're written in a really old-fashioned style, use old different dialogue and things like that. So I think it is easier to read new books. I think new books are also slightly shorter.
How did you get into writing?
I got into writing through, well, I've always liked writing. I've always written in my spare time and as a hobby and things like that. I never showed anybody anything I wrote until I was quite old. And I wrote a book when I had a job in London, and I live outside London. So I was catching the train every day. It took me an hour there and an hour back. And I wrote a book on the train. And that was the first book that I ever really put loads of effort into, and the first book that I showed to people, and I got good feedback about that from the people I showed, and then I just took that on, really. I just carried on showing it to people. They kept giving me feedback. I kept changing it, taking into account some of the things, not everything they said, but some of the points they made, making it better and better. And then that was my first, that's the first book I got published. Which
Wow.
was,
So first book you wrote was the first book that was also published?
yeah, well, the first book I finished, but I had been writing for about 20 years before then, just, you know, bits and pieces of like starts of books and poems and that kind of stuff, just random stuff really, but never just doing it off for my own sake, really.
So if any of our students want to read your first book, Will, can you tell us the title?
Funnily enough, I have it here. Look, there's the professional. Right, it's in my hand as we speak. It's The Unlikely Adventures of Mabel Jones, and this. If you're reading,
that's the series, isn't it?
It is the series. Now, Demi, if you're reading The Great Gatsby, you might find this a little trivial and a little bit puerile. It's a pirate adventure about a girl who is kidnapped by animal pirates from another world. It is. I think it could be enjoyed by old children too, because it's got some jokes in that little kids don't get and things like that.
That's wonderful. Demi, what other questions do you have?
What was the best advice you've ever been given as a writer?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that question again, and I've been dying to be asked that question for so long, because that's a really, like, it allows me to give the best advice, you see, like, and it's not my advice. It's not advice I was given personally. I've been given loads of really good advice by loads of really good writers, but this is advice that I read, and it's from Neil Gaiman, who wrote loads of famous books. Literally,
Graveyard Book, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, Graveyard Book is. Then loads of graphic novels too, loads of TV stuff. If someone tells you that there's something wrong with your book, they're right. But if they tell you what exactly it is and how to fix it, they're almost always wrong.
Ooh.
Very true, because like if someone says like, "Oh, I got lost a bit here. I didn't really understand what was going on," you're always kind of tempted as the author to go, "Oh, well, I explain that later," or you know, like you just misread it or something like that. But you know, if someone doesn't get it, they don't get it. That's not that's you can't argue with that. That's actually a fact. But often when people give you advice, they say, "Oh, you tried doing this, or have you tried doing that?" And really, that you don't want that advice. You just want people to tell you where it's wrong and then let you go off and fix it.
I really like that advice, Will. I remember reading in Stephen King's book on writing, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, he said that if you give a book to someone else to read, ask them to tell you all the bits where they put it down and stopped.
Yeah.
Because those are going to be the boring bits.
Yeah.
I thought that's good advice.
Yeah, I've got kids. So I've got a daughter who's 13 and another one who's 8, and they're really good. Kids are really good for testing books because they just stop reading when they get bored, and it's exactly that. You know, I mean, I know if I'm reading out loud and like to one of like a story I've written to one of them, and they go, "Look, can we read that? Can we read the other book now?" I mean, I know that I've lost them, and it's just, you know, like, and kids are really good at that because they don't pretend to go, "Oh no, it's really good." They're just really honest about it. But then they also don't say, "Oh, I kind of saw it going off in this direction. I would have liked to have done it like this if I was you." And that's kind of really annoying feedback to get from me. So I like the honesty of children. "Oh, kill your darlings." That's a good expression. Do you know that expression, Demi?
No.
This is sometimes when you're editing your own work, you have to take out the best bits, the bits you like the most, and that is the expression "kill your darlings." I've also heard it as like in much more grisly terms. It's about killing your favourite bits for the sake of the story. So you have to be prepared. If you say with Mabel Jones, say it's got loads of jokes in, I might have a really funny joke in there, but if it doesn't help the story develop, if it doesn't make the characters seem more realistic. If it doesn't make the plot exciting, if it's just a joke for the joke's sake, then you have to get rid of it, and you have to be prepared to do that and kill the best bits. It might be the best written line you've ever made, but you still have to sort of be prepared to get rid of it. And that's the beauty of editing.
Yeah, I think Murder Your Darlings is really good advice. Do you write, Demi?
So other than at school, no, not at the minute.
Okay. Have you got any more questions for Will?
If you could only read one type or genre of stories ever again, what would you pick and why?
I'd read graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
If I could only read one type of book, I think, because I think that covers like a wide range of things, and I love graphic novels, and they've got pictures, and you can read them more than once, and you see more things in them, I think, as you read them and you become familiar with the pictures. If it was a genre, I think I would read I think I might read I'll go for sort of adventure stroke thriller books, like the sort of spy novels and things like that, and that kind of thing. Exciting books that are kind of fun. I read lots of those. I think I'd miss reading those.
Can I ask a follow-up question there?
Yeah, go for it.
You meant graphic novels. What's your favourite graphic novel?
My favourite graphic novel is Mouse.
Yeah.
It's by Art Spiegelman, which is just I think one of the best books.
Good pick.
Not the best book ever written. It's definitely in my top 10 books I've ever read. That's such a really good book.
If you're in charge of schools for one day, what would you do or change?
Oh, this is a good one. Because okay, so I would put much more emphasis on creative writing and reading for pleasure rather than reading set text. I'd let children choose what books they wanted to read, and I'd also make the syllabus more about analysing the books that you're interested in rather than being given like set books. Okay.
I was going to ask you, Will, seeing as we're talking about teachers, did you have an inspirational teacher when you were at school who helped you fall in love with reading and writing?
No, but I had encouraging ones. I had ones that encouraged me, definitely. I think my inspiration for reading came from my dad mainly. I think he had lots of books and he read loads, so I read loads. And I had loads of older brothers, so I'm sort of you're really influenced by your siblings and things like that. So they were all into reading, and then it just was. So I had a really sort of privileged path up to being a reader, I guess, in that respect. That it wasn't even a choice; it was just how it was in my house that we'd read books.
The other thing that I really wanted to get you to tell us about, Will, was what are your favourite books that you've written? What are the ones you're proudest of?
Oh well, so lots of them. I mean, I always prefer my most recent book because I'm getting better. Every time I write, I learn more, and every time, it's just like anything in life. I mean, writing's a good thing because it doesn't matter about, if I was a footballer, I'd slowly be getting worse and worse as I'm getting older.
Yeah.
But because I'm a writer, you get better and better. I learn more and more things, and so the Embassy of the Dead books I'm quite proud of. I think I like those. I really like Mabel Jones one because it was my first one, so I'm really fond of that character, and I love writing that story, and that's the natural way I write. Those books are written in a very different style to the Embassy of the Dead, so that's more of a natural style for me. But my favourite book is this one, I Can Endure Worms. They let me draw. I think
it's wonderful. Yeah, look, there's my copy.
Excellent.
And we've got some copies of this to give away, and we've also got some copies of Embassy of the Dead. Are there any others that we think we should get for prizes? Well, that you think?
I think what ages are we talking about? Like any?
Well, right from we've got students right from primary school, but we've also got lots of secondary age students. So, what would some of your older students? What would some of our older students really enjoy that you've written?
I think the Embassy of the Dead.
Yeah.
I'd recommend for those students, and I would think that it is probably suitable up to like about, I mean, like, you know, you can read a book at any age. I still read picture books. So it's suitable for all ages, but it's about someone who's just going up into year 7.
Okay.
That's the age of the hero.
Right.
Year 7, and it's involving his, you know, it's sort of like about his life. That's about a boy that can suddenly discovers he can see and hear ghosts. And he strikes up a friendship with a ghost, the ghost of a dead schoolgirl from the 1980s. Unfortunately, there's an organization called the Embassy of the Dead that think the living and the dead should never meet. So they send out a Grim Reaper to send them both to the eternal void, because they've you know, they've done something very wrong as far as the afterworld believes. So they steal a car and go on the run. So it's like a road trip on the run from a Grim Reaper to ghosts.
Yeah. So the other thing I think makes you a really interesting writer, Will, is that you write for very different audience. You write for picture books for very young children, as well as traditional narrative adventure stories for older children. Why do you think you've got such a diverse portfolio of books?
It's, I think, the same reason I struggle with loads and loads of different things. It's like a weakness that is also a strength, in that I have loads of thoughts like going around my head like crazy all the time, and I've got no control over or focus over anything. So I find it really difficult to concentrate on things. I can't. I daydream all the time. So I've got all these things. It's you know, some aspects of my life that is a problem, but in terms of coming up with ideas and writing and being interested in different things, it's a real strength, I think, because, you know, I've got thousands and thousands of different interests, and I like different things, and I read different types of books. I'm not just into one thing, I'm into loads of things, and that's reflected in the books I write, I think. Yeah. They've all got the same sort of vibe. Having said that, they've all got the same sort of vibe, though. They're all at least a little bit funny, I think.
Right, agreed. Yeah.
And they're all, I mean, even my children, the picture books are, I don't know, maybe dry humor.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. There's a very dry humor in there, which I imagine, you know, that my children are now too old to want picture books. They're teenagers, but I think I would have really appreciated reading them as a parent, because I would be chuckling and they'd be enjoying the story. But Demi, have you got any more questions you'd like to ask Will?
Do your characters change much over like the writing process? Like, have you ever started with a character, then read back and thought, no, I don't like that, and changed it?
Yeah, all the time. It always happens, and it's because I don't really plan things properly. Now, there's like 2 schools of writing, I think, or 2 poles on a scale of, like, you can plan things meticulously, you can just make it up as you go along, and I'm sort of towards that end of it, of making up as I go along. There is a rough plan, but it means I'll bring in a character, and sometimes that character will either become much bigger than I ever intended, if it's fun and it's good fun to write and they're an important character, or you can get yourself caught in a dead end with a character and have to, like, just kill them off, and just, you know, either you just kill them off in the story and that's fine, but normally what that involves is going all the way back through the book and you know, properly
Murdering your darlings.
Murdering that particular darling.
Great question so far, Demi. Really excellent. I think we've probably got time for one more before Will has to shoot off to go and pick up his children.
Yeah.
How did you get your inspiration for your favourite book?
Embassy of the Dead is just based on one thought, and there's can't remember which it was. It's John Wyndham, I think, this is like how he wrote books, and he's like a sci-fi writer. He wrote Day of the Triffids and films like and books like that.
Kraken Wakes.
The Kraken Wakes, yeah, lots of classics, and it's sort of just thinking of one thing and then working out like the logical conclusion to it. Okay, and that's kind of where I started with that. Where with Embassy of the Dead, I was imagining. This is quite deep, by the way. I warn you now that this answer could go on for quite some time, and it could be quite boring. So feel free to cut this out. Okay, with Embassy of the Dead, I imagined what happens after you die. Okay, so I'm from a certain upbringing, like I've got fairly religious parents. I'm not religious myself particularly. I'm sort of like, I guess, agnostic in that I don't really know what happens when you die. I mean, obviously, I don't know what happens when you die. I don't think anyone really can claim that exactly. But I really don't think that I know. So I was imagining what would happen, and it was at the time of loads of political upheavals, a bit like now, a few years ago, with sort of just feeling the whole world and country was just really badly run by people. This was like about, I can't remember how many years ago this was, but it was a few years ago. And I imagined that if there was an afterlife, it would probably be run really, really badly. And that was the premise. Yeah, I imagined it would be really badly run. And then so you create a world where the afterlife is really badly run. And you have to think like, well, how are they deciding who goes to heaven and who goes to hell? Like, well, all of this stuff I'm working out in my head before I've written the book.
That's a great answer. I really like the idea of putting ordinary people into extraordinary, bizarre situations and seeing what happens. But so having that idea that, you said you didn't want to give writing advice. That's actually probably quite good writing advice there, Will. Demi, Will, thanks so much for that. Demi, you did all the hard work coming up with those brilliant questions.
Yeah, thanks, Demi.
That was amazing. Will, thanks ever so much for giving us some time to talk about your career and your inspiration and your books. We will have, for those watching, if Will has inspired you to read some of his books, then there will be some prizes for all of your hard work. But where's but you can go out and buy them as well. And so Embassy of the Dead. What's the one about Mabel, the pirates?
The Unlikely Adventures of Mabel Jones.
The Unlikely Adventures of Mabel Jones. For the very, very young amongst you, I Can Only Draw Once. It is very funny, though. You've got a new young children's book out called about fleas, haven't you? Dogs. Yeah, Flea Seeks Dog.
Flea Seeks Dog, which is about a flea who thinks that they can find a better dog.
Brilliant. Yeah. And why wouldn't they? So thanks ever so much for watching, and happy reading.